One became the most unforgettable detective on American television. One walked away from the show at the height of its success, turning a breakout role into one of the most debated exits in TV history. One arrived as a replacement and left as a heartbreak. Viewers never forgot. One carried trauma through the squad room with a badge, a gun, and a past that would not stay buried. And one little boy from the precinct, the child who helped soften Andy Sipowicz, left the world at only 27 years old. For 12 seasons, NYPD Blue gave America something television had rarely shown this honestly before. Cops who were not clean heroes, cases that did not end neatly, and people who carried their damage into every room they entered.
This was not the polished police drama of an earlier era. This was the 15th Precinct, a place of anger, loyalty, addiction, grief, divorce, violence, redemption, and second chances that did not always come in time. When NYPD Blue premiered in 1993, it felt different from almost anything else on network television. The camera moved like it was following people who did not want to be watched too closely. The dialogue was rough. The emotions were raw. The detectives were flawed, exhausted, impatient, and sometimes impossible to like. But that was exactly why viewers believed them. They were not written like saints. They were written like people. For many Americans, NYPD Blue became more than a cop show. It became a portrait of men and women trying to survive the damage that came with the job, and the damage they had already brought with them before the first case began. The squad room was not just where crimes were solved. It was where guilt, grief, ambition, loyalty, and regret came to the surface. And once viewers stepped inside, they rarely forgot the people waiting there. Kim Delaney gave NYPD Blue one of its most wounded souls. As Detective Diane Russell, she entered the 15th Precinct with strength on the surface and damage underneath. She was not written as the simple female detective in a room full of men. She was sharper than that, more complicated than that, and far more fragile than she wanted anyone to see. Diane Russell was tough because she had to be. She carried herself like someone who knew how to survive, but survival was not the same as peace. The show gave her trauma, addiction, grief, love, and loss, and Delaney played all of it with a quiet ache that made Diane feel real. Her relationship with Bobby Simone became one of the emotional centers of the series. It was not glossy television romance. It felt like two damaged people trying to build something honest in a world that kept taking things from them. And when Bobby's story ended, Diane's grief gave NYPD Blue some of its most painful aftershocks. Before the Precinct, Kim Delaney had already found success on daytime television with All My Children. After NYPD Blue, she continued working across major television projects, including Army Wives, proving that Diane Russell was not the end of her career. But her public life also carried difficult chapters. Like many stars who became famous playing wounded people, Delaney's own journey after fame was not always easy or neatly explained. Diane Russell survived the Precinct by refusing to break in front of it. Kim Delaney gave NYPD Blue its emotional edge, then kept moving through a life and career that were never as simple as fame made them look. Not every actor on NYPD Blue needed to dominate the room to become unforgettable. Gordon Clapp and James McDaniel gave the 15th Precinct something just as important as fire or heartbreak. They gave it structure. Gordon Clapp played Detective Greg Medavoy, the kind of character who could have disappeared into the background on another show. He was awkward, insecure, sometimes funny, sometimes painfully human. But in Clapp's hands, Medavoy became one of the most believable men in the squad room. Not a television hero, not a legend, just a working detective trying to do the job while carrying his own small failures. That made him matter. James McDaniel played Lieutenant Arthur Fancy, the man who had to keep the room from collapsing under the weight of its own tempers. Fancy did not need long speeches to hold authority. His calm was the counterweight to Sipowicz's rage, and his presence reminded viewers that even in a show built on chaos, someone still had to keep the walls standing. Neither man was the face on every poster, but both helped make the Precinct feel real. Without Medavoy, the show loses its nervous humanity. Without Fancy, it loses its center of command. They were the kind of actors who made every louder performance around them stronger. Sipowicz gave NYPD Blue its fire. Simone gave it heartbreak. But Gordon Clapp and James McDaniel gave the 15th Precinct its backbone, the quiet structure that made everything else feel true. And then there was Austin Majors. For years, NYPD Blue was a show about damaged adults, cops carrying marriages, addictions, dead partners, bad choices, and the weight of a city that never stopped bleeding. But Theo Sipowicz brought something different into that world. He brought innocence. Austin Majors played Theo, the young son of Andy Sipowicz, and his presence changed the way viewers saw Andy. Before Theo, Sipowicz was a man fighting himself. After Theo, he became a father with something fragile to protect. The boy did not erase Andy's damage. He gave that damage a reason to heal. That is what made Theo so important. In a precinct full of anger and grief, he was the reminder that life could still begin again. Austin was only a child when he joined the show, but people who worked with him remembered the joy he brought to the set. Dennis Franz later spoke warmly about him, remembering him not only as a talented young actor, but as a bright presence in a show built around pain. After NYPD Blue, Austin continued his education and studied film, production, and cinematography at USC. He also pursued music, trying to build an identity beyond the little boy viewers remembered from television. But his story ended far too soon. In 2023, Austin Majors died at only 27 years old. Later reports listed the cause as an accidental fentanyl overdose. On screen, Theo Sipowicz helped Andy become a better man. Off-screen, Austin Majors left behind the memory of a child actor who brought light into one of television's darkest precincts. And a life that ended before it had time to become everything it might have been. Several other names helped make NYPD Blue feel larger than any one detective. Sharon Lawrence played Sylvia Costas, the assistant district attorney who became Andy Sipowicz's wife and one of the most important emotional turning points of his life. Her presence gave Andy something the audience had not expected from him: tenderness, fear, and the possibility of a future. Nicholas Turturro brought youthful loyalty to Detective James Martinez, a character who made the early seasons feel alive with nervous energy and heart. Mark Paul Gosselaar arrived later as Detective John Clark Jr., carrying his own television history from Saved by the Bell into a much darker adult world. Amy Brenneman appeared early as Janice LaCalci, then went on to build another major television legacy with Judging Amy. And Bill Brocktrup, as John Irvin, brought humanity and warmth into a precinct that often seemed allergic to softness. They were not always the biggest names in the headlines, but without them, the 15th Precinct would never have felt like a real place. So where does the NYPD Blue cast stand now in 2026? The show ended in 2005, but the people who walked through the doors of the 15th Precinct did not all leave in the same direction. Dennis Franz stepped away from acting and remains, for many fans, the one true face of NYPD Blue. David Caruso turned one of television's most controversial exits into a second life with CSI Miami. Jimmy Smits continued building a long, respected career across television, film, and stage. Kim Delaney kept working through both success and difficult public chapters. Gordon Clapp, James McDaniel, Sharon Lawrence, Nicholas Turturro, Mark Paul Gosselaar, Amy Brenneman, and Bill Brocktrup all carried pieces of the show into other corners of American television. And Austin Majors became the most painful name to revisit, the child from the precinct whose life ended far too soon. The cases are closed now. The squad room is empty. But NYPD Blue still feels alive because its cast made the job look human, damaged, and unforgettable. But that is why NYPD Blue still matters. Most television police dramas ask viewers to believe in the badge. NYPD Blue asked viewers to look at the person carrying it. The anger, the fear, the addiction, the shame, the loneliness. The desperate hope that one good act might balance out a lifetime of bad ones. That was the secret of the show. It was never really about clean arrests or perfect justice. It was about people trying to survive the damage that came with the job, and sometimes the damage they brought with them before the job ever began. On screen, Andy Sipowicz is still walking into the squad room with a coffee cup, a hard stare, and a past he cannot fully escape. John Kelly is still young and cool enough to make viewers believe he will be there forever. Bobby Simone is still alive in the episodes before the heartbreak comes. Diane Russell is still holding herself together. Medavoy is still trying. Fancy is still watching the room. Theo is still just a little boy.
But off-screen, time kept moving. Careers rose, fell, changed shape, or went quiet. Some actors found second chapters. Some stepped away. Some became part of other television memories. And some left the world much earlier than anyone expected. That is what fame does after the spotlight fades. It leaves the characters untouched, but it does not spare the people who played them. The 15th Precinct is closed now. The cases are over. The desks are empty. But for anyone who watched NYPD Blue in the 1990s and early 2000s, those faces still carry something familiar. A reminder of an era when network television became rougher, braver, and more human. Which NYPD Blue cast member stayed with you the most? Was it Sipowicz, John Kelly, Bobby Simone, Diane Russell, Theo, or someone else from the 15th Precinct? Tell us in the comments.
But before we leave the 15th Precinct behind, there is one more truth that makes NYPD Blue different from most shows of its era. It did not survive because every character was easy to love. It survived because every character felt like someone who had already lost something. That was true of Sipowicz, but it was also true of the people around him. Sylvia Costas gave him love when viewers were not sure he deserved it. Bobby Simone gave him trust when he was still learning how to accept it. Diane Russell gave the show grief that did not disappear after one episode. Theo gave him a reason to become more than the damaged man he had been. And that is why the cast still matters in 2026. They did not just play detectives, lawyers, lieutenants, and children moving through a police station. They played the cost of living too close to pain for too long. They made viewers believe that redemption was possible, but never easy. They made loss feel permanent. They made second chances feel earned.
For some actors, NYPD Blue became the role fans would always mention first. For others, it became one chapter in a much larger career. But for the audience, the precinct never fully closed. Because somewhere in memory, Andy is still at his desk, Bobby is still walking through the door. Diane is still trying not to break, and Theo is still the little boy who made a wounded man want to be better. That is the story after fame. The show ended. The people moved on. But the damage, the love, and the memory stayed. The final surprise of NYPD Blue is that its legacy does not belong only to the stars who stayed in front of the camera the longest. It belongs to the emotional weight they left behind. By the time the series ended, the 15th Precinct had become more than a police station. It was a place where viewers watched men and women fall apart, recover, fail again, and still return to the job the next morning. That rhythm became the soul of the show. Franz gave the series its wounded heart. David Caruso gave it the shock of ambition and departure. Jimmy Smits gave it warmth, dignity, and one of its most painful goodbyes. Kim Delaney gave it emotional damage that felt lived in. Gordon Clapp and James McDaniel gave it the ordinary human texture that made the precinct believable. And Austin Majors gave it something none of the adults could give it. He gave it innocence. That is why his story lands so hard near the end of this cast journey. NYPD Blue was never a gentle show. It was built on murder rooms, interrogation rooms, hospital visits, broken marriages, and confessions that came too late. But Theo Sipowicz reminded viewers that even in a world that dark, there was still something worth protecting. For Andy Sipowicz, Theo was not just a son. He was proof that a damaged man could still become a father. That is the deeper story of NYPD Blue after fame. The actors aged, the careers shifted, and the headlines faded. But the characters stayed exactly where viewers left them, at their desks, in the squad room, under fluorescent lights, carrying one more case and one more regret. Some shows are remembered for their plots. NYPD Blue is remembered for its scars. And more than 20 years after the final episode, those scars still feel real. By 2026, NYPD Blue no longer feels like just another show from the 1990s. It feels like a line in television history. Before it, many network police dramas still kept their heroes at a distance. They solved cases, delivered justice, and moved on. NYPD Blue did something different. It let the audience sit with the damage. It let viewers watch cops make mistakes, say the wrong thing, ruin relationships, fight addiction, lose people they loved, and still come back the next day because the work was all they knew how to do. That is why the cast mattered so much. Franz did not give America a perfect detective. He gave America a man trying to become decent before it was too late. Caruso gave the show its first shock of fame. Jimmy Smits gave it grace and heartbreak. Kim Delaney gave it wounded strength. Clapp and James McDaniel gave it everyday truth. Austin Majors gave it innocence.
Together, they made the 15th Precinct feel less like a set and more like a place viewers had walked through themselves. And when a show leaves that kind of mark, it does not really end when the final episode airs. It stays behind, waiting for anyone who still remembers the sound of those squad room doors opening. So where are they now? Franz remains the face most viewers think of first when they hear NYPD Blue. He has lived quietly for years, far from the constant machinery of Hollywood, and that silence has only made Andy Sipowicz feel larger in memory. Some actors chase another role forever. Franz left behind one that did not need to be repeated. Caruso became the great cautionary tale and the great contradiction. He left NYPD Blue early, took the damage that came with that decision, and later found another massive television identity with CSI Miami. His story is not just about leaving too soon. It is about how fame can punish ambition, then reward patience years later. Jimmy Smits continued moving through television history with the confidence of a man who never needed one role to define him completely. Simone remains one of his most beloved characters, but the career after Bobby proved that Smits was never just a replacement. He was a lasting presence.
Kim Delaney kept working through success, scrutiny, and difficult chapters, carrying the complicated legacy of Diane Russell with her. Clapp and James McDaniel remain reminders that the strongest shows are built not only by stars, but by the actors who make every room believable. And Austin Majors is the name that changes the temperature of the story. The child who gave Andy Sipowicz a softer future did not get enough of his own. The cast moved on, the precinct closed. But NYPD Blue left behind something rare. A television world where every scar still feels earned. That is what makes NYPD Blue so hard to forget. On screen, the 15th Precinct is still there. Andy Sipowicz is still walking in with the weight of the world on his shoulders. John Kelly is still young enough to look untouchable. Simone is still alive before the goodbye arrives. Diane Russell is still holding herself together. Medavoy is still trying to say the right thing, Fancy is still keeping the room from falling apart, and Theo is still just a little boy, unaware of how much hope he represents. But outside the frame, time kept moving. The actors aged, careers changed, fame rose, faded, returned, or went silent. Some found peace away from the cameras. Some built second lives in other roles. Some carried public struggles. And some left the world before their stories felt finished. That is the difference between television and life. Television lets the characters stay exactly where we remember them. Life does not offer that kindness.
And maybe that is why these cast stories stay with us. We are not just asking where they are now. We are asking what happened after the applause stopped, after the headlines moved on, after the squad room lights went dark. NYPD Blue gave America a show about broken people trying to do the right thing. The cast gave those broken people faces we still remember. Which NYPD Blue cast member stayed with you the most? Was it Sipowicz, John Kelly, Simone, Diane Russell, Theo, or someone else from the 15th Precinct? Tell us in the comments.